Good, welcome back on stage.
Thank you.
So, great presentations, very many different aspects, and also as we are seeing with the organizers, there's different aspects like the business, the aspects of science, the aspect of faith. Let me maybe open up with a question. How do you see that interaction in the way you work? Is there a difference in the perspectives between the different areas from a faith perspective? Are you looking differently at AI than from a business perspective, where it's mostly about finding these opportunities, Mary, you mentioned, or from a science point of view?
If I start, I actually was really glad to hear your presentations and how well they follow my own thoughts and the thoughts in our ETHICS project that we have been doing. And I think that the Nitin and Mary, you presented the quite easy to understand and practical questions as well, and how the ethics are put into practice in different in a technical systems, and how they show to the customers or in society, and for example also in enterprise level, how it is done. And I think that is a really important question. In many cases, the interaction in AI ethics remains in academic and a little bit perhaps philosophical questions about different principles. And we have been criticizing in our project that approach, because we need to, in every action, we promote something. We try to gain something good, or we aim to enhance something or protect something, and that implies what we take is valuable and how we put our values in practice. So I think that the connection to the action, a real action made by humans, and the actions that the AI systems make is a really important way to put these different perspectives from faith and enterprises and science to communicate together.
Maybe to jump on Tina's points, I think to answer your question about this difference of perspective, I think in ethics and AI, there's not one size fits all at all. It will always depend on the kind of applications that we're speaking about, and it will always require the kind of knowing the technology that we are speaking about as well for this specific application. So that's why it's very beneficial to have all stakeholders around the table, but depending on the applications and also how the applications connect to other applications as well. I think that's what I had to say.
Quickly commenting on that actually, I think many new things emerge from science and from research, and that's how it is, and how it needs to be. And I think this topic also emerged from there. What motivated me to start my own company in this space, and even in my previous roles to explore, is that it feels this is super important, but the concept also seemed very difficult to for a regular business person and everyday work from perspective when I work and develop this system. So how should I change? What needs to happen? We know that something needs to be done, but how to do that? And that actually motivates me a lot, and that's a big part of my work to collaborate with researchers and try to find ways how to translate those concepts and ideas into something that are implementable in scale in businesses. I would curious to hear how about this faith aspect, because that's not always in the room, and I think it's important because overall in AI ethics we are talking about good and bad decisions and choices, and church has an incredible important role in that discussion, and that has been the community or to a lot of influence on that. So I think it is time to have that conversation as well, stronger in the AI ethics conversation.
So maybe I'll start by posing two countercurrents. We have to think about the philosophical challenges of this field also. I mean, I know that you're saying you need to translate all these things to practice, but there is a lot of room in this space that we still need to grapple with. And we have to be careful about the commodification of AI ethics. And we saw that beautiful landscape that Mary put up, and my worry about this landscape is that very quickly we are making it into a business problem that can be solved with tools and platforms and technologies, and we're commodifying it in a way that could be problematic. Now, Mary's work is the work that I always show to my students, and I invite her to bring that approach because it's very systematic and thorough. But is it tackling the entire ecosystem that we should be thinking about? And for me, that ecosystem includes civil society, includes far larger sphere of the global south and indigenous communities who are not currently having this conversation. They are not part of, they have not been invited to the table. And that's why I brought the sacred into it. It's a different coin of the faith, but I brought in how do faith-based communities, indigenous communities think about the sacred act of agency, the sacred act of the entire ecology of the systems they live in, and what can we learn from them? We are too much anchored in Western philosophies of ethics, and I try very hard for us to seek answers or seek inspiration from a wider range of looking at science fiction, looking at culture, looking at philosophy, looking at the sacred. So we need to take a transdisciplinary approach to these things. So my entire team is a very transdisciplinary team. I have social scientists, anthropologists, some of them are sitting here. I have legal scholars, I have computational linguists. We need all these people in the room, and maybe I should hire an indigenous scholar as well to really bring to us, to challenge us, to think that maybe we can't solve everything, but we have to ask much harder questions. And maybe there's some areas where we simply need to take a step back and rethink what is our role as society. So I'm really enjoying working in the public sector context because I think the public sector is quite savvy, at least in Finland. They are cautious, but they're also very progressive in thinking about these questions. And we can have a big influence, the intersection of academy, industry, and public sector working together to come up with the right framework.
Yeah, thank you.
I would like to comment
sure.
that I think it's super important that you raised that, and I recognize the tendency that we have, and I would say especially from the investor side, coming that we need that one solution that gives you ethical AI. So do you have that algorithm that proves that your AI is ethical? Exactly. I cannot say how many times I've faced these questions because investors want to invest in something that is like that. And I've been saying that it's impossible in this space. It's complex, and even many times I would like this more merciful community for these discussions when we talk about different players. Attempts to solve related problems, and very often we take this approach that okay, they are putting effort on transparency, so they think that that's the only way, that's the only answer. So yeah, and that is not the way. And I think most of us also understand that there is no one answer to this. We need to have quite a broad perspective and deploy different ways of tackling these questions. Yeah.
And
If I can continue a little bit, I just would like to add that ethics is a practice. It's something that we actually do all the time, and I think that these discussions between different parts of our societies, the faith part as well as the society and enterprises and technology, are the way to create the different understanding. And I think that your aim is really valuable to bring the different silent voices to the table to discuss and tell perhaps from different kind of perspective what could be valuable for our future societies and what we might miss if we go for some kind of direction. And I think that's really good goal.
And I think we've been talking about good and bad decision, right or wrong decision, and that's naturally contextual. I mean, what we're seeing in today's world is that a good decision around here might be seen as a bad decision in a completely different part of the world. So also that is naturally contextual, depending on your faith, depending on where you're coming from, depending on your business, what your business is, what you want to do. Google will most likely argue that many of their decisions are absolutely the right decisions, whereas someone else might say it's not. In that context, and picking on them, I think there's other companies as well in that context. Now, over the past years, now we see the geopolitical situation that's changing the landscape. Over the past 2 years, we've shifted our lives online, much more digital. I mean, we're basically. I noticed earlier today when I got my coffee, I'm paying with credit card. So some company out there has all my transactions that I have. I have all my meetings online. I have a lot of other things online. Do you feel that over the past 2 years, with all of these things happening very fast, with the world changing, with our perspective of the world changing, and this hybrid world coming together much more, that AI has taken a more important role, but specifically also ethics and the consideration and the societal discourse about the topic, the discussion is becoming more important, but also maybe more active in that sense?
I actually think that perhaps this time I cannot speak about the technical development or the enterprise, how much the money going to the different AI technologies has increased, or how much they make profit during COVID time. But I can speak for the people, perhaps. That I think that we have come to value the basic human connection that has been missing or really limited. And I think it's somehow put forward and like we have gained a collective power for the human voice to come to develop more human world with the technologies and within the technologies in the future. I'm not sure if you share my vision, but I think that that's perhaps something that's been happening.
I do share the vision, and I think that's a structural reality that we live in. We are fully digitalized, and for example, I mean, I think this has been over the past 10 years already, that ever since we started using social media on quite a scale, then we want this to be free. And if we want it to be free, then we have to give up some data, and we have to, there has to be some kind of a harvesting process so that it does remain free, and there is some kind of a monetization process behind. And I think going back to the question of ethics as well, I think there's a paradox in time, in that the technology is going extremely fast. The data is going extremely fast as well. But at the same time, an ethical reflection or meta-ethical reflection would require a lot of time to think and pause and ponder all of those kind of issues. But then we have this diversity as well of applications. So I think the key paradox is that the technology is going to be fast, but the ethics is necessarily going to be applied. And the application is necessarily going to give the big kind of answers. So it's going to be an iterative process by essence. We cannot hope to have, of course we can have regulations, but we cannot hope to have a generic ethical set of AI principles applicable to each and every situation. It's going to be from the bottom up. I mean, that's an important kind of meta-ethical kind of structure to understand as well.
I think we're dealing with the first wave right now. If we look at human history of industrial production, of scaling systems, we start with really large infrastructures that are controlled by large companies, and eventually we start to find these innovations start to become commonplace, almost kind of part of the ether. And unfortunately or fortunately, we're dealing with large algorithmic systems and big data that are increasingly part of our everyday infrastructures. That is just the way it is. But this is the first wave for me. There are multiple waves that will come after this that may make us much more critical and much more also empower grassroots citizen organizations. So why don't I have an AI agent working for me that's looking at the things that are being shared with me, websites, all of this, and helping me make better decisions, working on my behalf. Why do I have to have Google and Microsoft provide those services? Why is there not civic AI? Why do I not have indigenous communities having their own AI systems that help them fight for their rights? That whenever there's an encroachment, the AI system starts to see that and starts to help them decide and starts to fight on their behalf. So I'm looking for the next wave where we are empowering citizens really in a genuine way, where they feel that they can use this technology to fight for their rights. So we have a very business-centric discussion of AI as if that's where AI belongs, because that's how we tend to think of industrial production, industrial processes. But we need to really humanize it and bring humans in the loop. So one of the projects we are developing now with the city of Espoo and the city of Helsinki is how can we improve the way we provide services to new migrants that are coming into the country, because we are having really quite a fantastic diversity of migrants arriving, whether they're coming from Syria or Ukraine now increasingly. What can we do to support them? Obviously, if 60,000 Ukrainians arrive in our country in the span of a few weeks, our systems are not ready for that. So how do we scale that up? So we need to use information technology. We need to use some form of automated support services, let's put it that way. Well, one of the things we want to do is design them in a hybrid way, where you have some kind of conversational AI system that a migrant could call and ask some basic questions in her own language in Somali, and then it says, well, let me connect you with a healthcare worker. Let me connect you with somebody who can help you with maternal care. Let me find you somebody that you actually can help you very, very quickly. So we need this kind of cooperation where the agency lives in the entire system between multiple parties, and it acts on behalf of the most vulnerable. So the systems I want to design are for the most vulnerable. And what can we do to do that in a cooperative way? That, for me, is the next wave.
Yeah, that makes sense. Anything to add from your development of SciDot? Because I would assume that in that context, you've been thinking a lot about how do you govern these different aspects of privacy, of using data in that context within a business context.
One thing that what I was thinking when listening is that what I've learned is also how difficult it is when you then, like, we are setting a lot of expectation, for example, on citizen involvement and different societies, stakeholders' involvement in the process. But then talk very little of what does it actually require to be part of and, like, contribute to that process, and how difficult it is. That's something that I've learned while working and trying to do that in practice, and then recognizing that, okay, it doesn't work that way that you go out from that door and ask, like, tell how your AI works and ask from the person, what do you think and how could we improve? Because it requires a lot of perspective and, like, education about the rights that we should protect when trying to use AI in a responsible manner, and about the technologies. Like, that's one of the key learnings for me, that how difficult it is actually to run these processes, what we so much appreciate and want to put in place.
Yeah. So we have to build the capacity among certain groups to be able to be actually involved in this process, and it doesn't come by itself.
And I think initiatives like Elements of AI, which I think most are familiar with, is a first step towards this kind of literacy in AI on a much broader scale to basically help with this discussion. Maybe a follow up on that. Society needs to be involved. People on the street need to be involved. They need to understand what they are getting themselves into if they put their data into an online search engine, into a tool, whatever. What do you think needs to change with regards to making sure, exactly as you said, Mayor, that people understand, not only the top management level in the organization, in the business side, but that people really understand what does it mean? How can we use it in a positive way? How can we use it for good in a way, and how can we control it? So how can I know what happens with my data? Because one thing, and that's maybe the background of my question, what I noticed when e-commerce started, I was very careful with giving away my social security number or my credit card information or my street address or anything, and it becomes easier and easier. Nowadays it's like, oh yeah, they want that. Okay, yeah, sure, let's do that. Or I need to agree to terms and conditions. Yeah, sure, I'll do that. It has become so easy because it has become part of our day-to-day life, and we're not even thinking about it anymore. And I mean, I'm in a position that I know mostly what they will be doing with my data in the background, but I would argue a good portion of society doesn't know what's happening in the background, what the data is being used for, and that if you search for a birthday present for your wife, that for the next 6 months you will see exactly these products in your Google search engine, because it will be somewhere in your cookies in the background. What do we need to do to educate people, to get that, like the grassroots groups that you mentioned, to really work for this topic? Meera.
Can I comment quickly? I don't believe that our governance and regulation can build on the assumption that the end user actually needs to be the one who takes the responsibility of deciding whether or not this is a good system to be used. We have a lot of activity around my data, and like Finland has been very proactive on that matter, and it's important for us, transparency for end users and so forth. I've been also driving that, but while doing that, I don't think that that's the winning route for regulating and making sure that our people use AI that is responsible. I think we need to enforce the organizations, and that's where the coming AI regulation is also focusing. We need to make sure that before the services get to are provided to those people, actually these matters have been thought through thoroughly and governed. So I don't say that it's not important to continue educating and providing that information, but I think it's critical that we don't try to make that or push the responsibility for the end user. Sort of externalizing the responsibility from an organization to the user. That you accept it. So
I agree, but at the same time, I think that I would like to look to the education and to children, because even younger and younger, they use different kind of devices that actually collects the data, and they are data objects. They are not actually data subjects. They don't act voluntarily. They don't understand how their data is collected. And I think that is part of the thing that should be in part of the next wave, to educate children not only here in Finland, not only here in Europe or every part of the world, to understand who and why and how their data is actually collected. And it's possible that they leave a trace, and people could actually use it in different ways later, because that understanding could be, I think that quite young children could understand something about that.
And I think they do. I mean, my son is making pictures of birds, and he puts them on Instagram. He knows exactly how to manipulate the algorithm, what to put there, what keywords he uses, how to formulate something. So I agree. I think kids are very smart in learning much, much faster about the pros and cons and how they can use the system, but also how the system is used in that context. Very good point. Maxime?
All of what has preceded is very, very true. I think the education as to our objectivity or subjectivity in terms of data usage is very, very important, but it's not going to be the panacea. Because the fact is that there might be a paradox again. Although we know that we give so much data away, although we know that it's used to better target us, are we still going to stop using all of the free services that we are using for free? I don't think so. I think the incentive, although the knowledge will be there, the incentive to stop doing that or to control that better is not going to go away. I think indeed, as Mary was saying, that there is more to be expected as to the regulation of the application of the AI. How do we make, for example, political election or political competition regulation in a way that it kind of reins in the power of those predictive tools that they are, so that new Cambridge Analytica is not made possible, that we maintain the fairness of elections, that there is some kind of a level playing field in politics, in business as well. So I think that's maybe the avenue that has more like quick results in terms of ethics regulation, although they cannot be one size fits all, of course.
I don't think we can regulate our way out of coming up with ethical practices. I know regulations have an important role to play. We are studying them. I have been a big proponent of examining the AI Act and its implications and how we can actually make it a competitive strength in Finland. If we are actually using the AI Act in a very smart way, we can show that our products are much more trusted and responsible. But that's not enough. I think we need alternative models. We need alternatives to large data systems, large algorithmic systems. We need a kind of new frameworks, open access frameworks. And by educating society, by educating civil servants that work in these organizations, by educating younger demographics, we actually have a project on algorithmic literacy between India and Finland, where we're working with younger people in vulnerable communities to help them think about what does it mean. What does AI mean in your lives? And even that term doesn't mean anything at some point. But they're actually very smart. They're catching on, and they're building alternatives to what we're providing them. Yeah. Why do we have to all use Instagram and Facebook? And why can't we come up with alternatives? And that is what I think the next wave should contain, is being able to very quickly, rapidly develop new alternatives that provide a countercurrent to large systems. And that's also true in politics. We always need alternatives in politics, rather than two parties in the US that dominate every kind of imagination we can have. We need more imagination, and that's why we need more alternatives. So that would be my way of thinking about this.
And it's contextual. I think in the US it's a very different view on these topics than it is in Europe, than it is in Asia and in other parts. So we're almost at lunchtime. Let me ask you one final question. What's your vision? So if we think to the next wave, if we think into the future, what will the ethical AI look like? And maybe also what will be our path there? Who wants to start with their vision?
Well, okay, I'll be the first victim. Ethical AI, I think in my field of work, is more a pessimistic field of work, let's say. It's more about security and societal threats. I think an ethical AI in that sense is that the technology would, or that, yes, the people will be more aware of why they are targeted with what. And I think an ethical AI in my field would translate into more actual regulations. Because we see that, for example, the AI and the micro-targeting techniques have had more effect in the US because there's less regulations as well in terms of political competition than, for example, in my country, in France, where the system is extremely regulated and the elections are extremely fair, and there's actually a lot of safeguards against the most disruptive uses of AI techniques. I think a world of regulation, or of more regulations, or well-thought regulations, so that there's enough laws, enough norms that make it less disruptive than it could be.
Cool.
Nutshell.
Who want to go next with the big vision?
Well, I believe that for this area, like for any other new areas, it happens that that one day it's not that significant its own area, because like we learn to change how we work, and I think that's a happy day when we don't need to talk about or have these kind of sessions to raise the focus and attention to this area. So yeah, but how do we get there? I guess there are a couple of things on the way.
So maybe something for the workshops then later.
Yeah.
Well, I think I expressed my vision quite well in the presentation and some of the discussions we've had, and it's about agency. Where is the agency in these systems? And can we find a way to have that agency distributed in a wider spectrum of society. And then we have succeeded somehow in perhaps making these systems ubiquitous, but also the ethical responsibility ubiquitous in ways that actually might be more in harmony with how we think of ourselves, our values in society. So that's really the projection I would like to make.
I actually don't have a huge vision. I think that I started to think after you asked the question that perhaps my vision contains some idea about human beings being able to live diverse versions of good life together, with or without the AI systems. Yeah, something like that. Really general.
I like that vision.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. Let's give a big hand for all our keynote speakers. This actually concludes the first part of the event. There will now be lunch. After lunch, there's 2 different tracks you can choose from. One will be the fireside chat and some case studies over there in the Fenster stage, so pretty much right around the corner there. And I see there's already wood being carried over to the fireside chat, so make sure you join there at 1 o'clock. The other track we have is upstairs. There's actually 5 workshops we have there. The setup will be that you can freely join the different workshops, so you don't have to log in on one specific workshop, but you can walk between the different workshops, contribute, hear what other participants have to say. That also starts at 1 o'clock, and that's upstairs. But until then, enjoy your lunch. Thanks for joining us, and looking forward to have a lot of very interesting discussions in the afternoon with all of you. And thanks again to all of the keynote speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.